Welcome to the Ecommerce Marketing Podcast, the highly rated digital marketing podcast that provides weekly digital marketing tips and strategies from some of the world's top digital marketers and e-commerce entrepreneurs that will help you take your digital marketing to the next level. Sit back and enjoy this power-packed episode hosted by Arlen Robinson, who is an e-commerce entrepreneur and digital marketing expert with over 20 years of experience. Hey, e-commerce marketing podcast listener. Are you looking to increase traffic and sales to your website? You can do this by launching your own affiliate program. Just visit getosi.com and sign up for a free trial today. That's getosi.com. Now get ready to hear from your e-commerce marketing expert of the week as they drill down to give you details on marketing strategies that can help grow your business.
Welcome back to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast, everyone. My name is Arlen, and I am your host. And today we've got a very special guest, Jeremy Slate, who is a fellow podcaster himself of the acclaimed Create Your Own Life podcast. He's also the CEO of Command Your Brand, which is a PR agency that he co-founded alongside his wife, Brielle. Their main service offering is to help entrepreneurs get media exposure. He also has a BA in theology and world religions from Seton Hall University and additional studies at Oxford. Recognized by Inc. magazine and Podcast magazine for his podcasting impact, he's also the author of notable books, including Unremarkable to Extraordinary and Command Your Brand. Welcome to the podcast, Jeremy.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. I'm stoked to be here and hang out.
Yeah, thank you for joining. Really excited to talk to you today because we're going to be talking about how to utilize the $1 billion podcast market to help grow your business. Because, as you and I know, we're both podcasters. It's big business these days. And, it's really hard to believe. I'm always telling people that, with this podcast, we've kicked off this show. Episode 1 launched in 2014, which was like, things were like a whole different animal. Before then, podcasts were, starting to get traction, but they are nowhere near where they are today. So I've seen the evolution of it, and right now it's a great opportunity for any brand to really get out there.
It's interesting, man, because it's I didn't realize you started in 2014 too. That was the year I started. So it's like I think there were around 250,000 shows in that period of time, and it's like I think 3.5 or 3.4 million, depending on what platform you look at. I think Spotify likes to claim there's more because it makes them sound better. But like it's really growing fast. But I think at the same time, something I've been talking about a lot recently in a lot of my keynotes is, legacy media is dying, and they're not doing appointment television anymore, unless of course my Green Bay Packers are on TV. They're not really doing appointment television anymore. It's, it's not the new season of this show is on, come and sit down or whatever. They want to sit down and they want to watch a whole season of Jack Reacher, or they want to, watch a show on Netflix or Prime. So you're seeing the consumers changing a lot. Yeah. And because of that, legacy media doesn't quite know what to do with it. And you're seeing that in how people consume podcasts as well. And a lot of the legacy brands have tried to come into the podcast world and do the same thing. Yeah. And it's just not working out. I know some of the bigger companies have actually ended up, though the podcast space is growing, laying off people because they're trying to do the same production strategy and stuff they did to build a television show. And it's just not the same.
Yeah, that's very true. And what's interesting about podcasts in general, especially this style of podcast where it's, one-on-one interview style about a specific subject, it's kind of going against what a lot of experts are always pushing, which is that everybody has a short attention span. Nobody can sit still. That's why we've got all these brief media clips, which of course there's a place for that. And that definitely is something a lot of people are consuming, these short clips or reels, YouTube shorts and what have you. All those things are popular. But at the same time, what's surprising a lot of these experts is that people will sit and watch a one-on-one. I mean, we've got some podcasters. This podcast is not as nearly as long, but we're about 30 minutes. But we've got some of the bigger podcasters like the Lex Friedmans of the world. He does 2-3 hour podcasts one-on-one with people, and he's getting millions and millions of views. And so that's really kind of defying what most people would actually expect. Yeah. I mean, what's your take on that and this whole thing where, people have this short attention span?
I think it's interesting because I think it's also like different audiences, right? I think when you look at people that come to podcasts, they usually come at them to learn something, and they're usually doing something else. I think of, we just got our bathroom redone, so which usually means I end up being the one to paint it. And I listened to I think it was like 50 podcast episode series about the Plantagenet kings of England. Like these are the things that I get pulled into because I'm just very interested. And
Right.
that's how podcast listeners are. We want to go deep on a subject. We really want to learn about something. Like if we see a 30-second clip or something that grabs our attention enough to go watch something longer, but that comes right back to the whole idea of legacy media, right? Like if you look at it, even if somebody was on a television show, it's 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. It's very short. Even an old radio spot is short. Podcasts, like you get into these long conversations where you can really develop something and learn something. And I appreciate you mentioning Lex Friedman, because you look at shows like that and Joe Rogan and things like that.
Yeah.
The conversations and the depth people get, like you could never get that in radio, television, or anything else. You're getting people exploring things. And I think that's where the real value is, man. Like a good conversation should be iron sharpens iron. And what I mean by that is a good idea forces a better idea. And that's what we can really do in podcasts, and you can't do in 30 seconds or a minute.
Yeah, very, very true. Very true. Before we kind of get deeper into the whole podcasting thing and how it can benefit e-commerce businesses, I'm really curious about your what I've described and what I read in your intro as far as your background and how you really got to where you were to where you are today, which is a background in theology. You went to some top universities, studied theology, world religions. How do you go from that to becoming the head of a co-founder of a PR agency and a podcaster? So I'm really curious as to how that transition happened.
Well, my only real goal in life was to be on Jeopardy, obviously by my education. I've always been somebody that's been very curious and always wanting to learn. I think that's how a lot of my education background was. I got to my junior year of college and I was a Catholic theology major, and they're like, hey, if you take these 2 more classes, you could be a double major. And I'm like, hey, that's a great idea. It looks good on a certificate. And I got to my senior year, they're like, you missed 2 more classes and you could have been a triple major in history. So like for me, it was like, I've always followed things I was curious doing. And luckily I was still able to graduate college that way. And for me, the goal was to be a college professor. That was what I really wanted to do. But I applied to only one PhD program. I didn't get in. And I actually ended up teaching at a small private school. And in private school, here in New Jersey at least, you don't make very much money. You work about 120 hours a week and you make $20,000 a year. So I was really, really burnt out after 2 years of doing that. And actually at that point in time, my mom ended up having a really bad stroke. This was back in 2013. So I was looking at what I'm doing. I'm like, I can't do this the rest of my life, man. Like I'm not happy. I'm burnt out. I'm miserable every day. Teaching kids is not like I thought it was going to be, because I'm somebody that enjoys learning. And it's just not the same, because the school had also gotten rid of like number grades. So like kids were like, all right, I can pass one thing for the entire year, be an absolute maniac. And that's the end of it. So I was just burnt out. So my mom ended up having a really bad stroke, and it made me look at a lot of what I'm doing. I'm like, I got to do something different. So I went through a number of different things. I sold life insurance, which I was really good at, but I hated conversations about death on a daily basis. It was kind of morbid. I sold products on Amazon, but I kind of messed up with my promo code and gave all my products away for $1 in about 20 minutes. So that was kind of the end of my Amazon selling career. I did Amazing Selling Machine and all that kind of stuff, but I screwed up and I ran out of product like so fast. And then from there, I'm just like, what do I want to do with my life? I ended up actually working at a friend's marketing firm. I had taught myself how to build websites, and I was pretty happy doing that. But I've been a podcast fan since 2009. So I started the show just, on a lark. And in our first 30 days, we had 10,000 downloads. So we had all this action really early on. And people are like, oh, can you help me with that? I'm like, help you do what? Like, I have a podcast. I talk to people. So we actually ended up starting a podcast production company. And we found that most of our clients preferred to actually go on podcasts rather than have them produce for them. So we just stuck with that 20%, dropped the 80. And ever since, 2016, we've been booking our clients on great shows. And I feel like it's funny how circular things are, because now in the last year with all, the AI developments and things like that, we are producing high quality podcasts for clients again, as well as booking. So it's been a fun journey, man.
Hey there, fellow entrepreneurs and B2B marketers. Before we dive back into the conversation, let me introduce you to a game changer in the lead generation arena, Lead Feeder. Now, we all know the struggle of identifying those elusive website visitors and turning them into valuable leads. But what if I told you there's a tool that not only promises but delivers on supercharging your lead generation and sales efforts? Enter Lead Feeder. Imagine having the power to identify companies visiting your website, track their behavior in real time, and seamlessly integrate it all with your CRM. Lead Feeder is not just a tool, it's your secret weapon for efficient and targeted lead engagement. What sets Lead Feeder apart? It's the ability to provide detailed insights into customer behavior, helping your sales team prioritize efforts and close deals faster. With customizable notifications, lead scoring, and GDPR compliance, Lead Feeder is changing the game. Ready to revolutionize your approach to leads and deals? Head over to leadfeeder.com for your free demo today. That's leadfeeder.com. Don't miss out on the future of successful lead generation with Lead Feeder.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that journey. Very interesting how you got to where you are today, for sure. You know, as we mentioned earlier, the stats will say, no matter what, you know, depending on who you ask, you know, there's of course several millions of podcasts that are out there, and so which goes to show that of course not every business, of course, has a podcast. There's still space for your business if you don't have a podcast. And so, in your experience, what would you say would be the critical first step, or first few steps, if you're a brand and you're looking to tap into this, you know, $1 billion podcast market?
Well, I think first of all, it's finding out like what the right use case is for you, because I think going the wrong one is kind of not the right way to do things. Like, for example, like let's say you're a well-established brand and you don't really have somebody that's like a face of the brand. Well, we have found that those are typically podcast campaigns that if you're going on shows don't go well, because you don't have somebody that's a recognized part of the brand and they're like, oh, we'll just throw our COO on it. Like, people don't know who they are, but they can talk about the company and people buy their stuff. And it ends up being like an infomercial and it's not really valuable. So for those brands, I've actually found it makes a ton of sense to do affiliate deals, you know, work with organizations that, you know, people may like your products and may use your products. And then like, you know, when they sell, you make money. Like, I have some of the products I pitch on my shows, you know, are really great products, and we make thousands of dollars a month by promoting other people's products. So for some brands, that might be the right way to go, because podcast advertising, it's not the same as like, you know, running a Google ad or something like that. It comes across like a recommendation. In 2019, Tim Ferriss did an experiment with his show where he went from an ad-supported model to like a Patreon user-supported model. And what he found was his audience is like, Tim, like, we don't mind paying you to help, but like, we actually liked the ads because we saw them as recommendations from you. And I think that's the difference with podcast ads. So if that's the way for your organization to go, great. But also as well, you want to look at every organization ultimately should be the hub of information. And that's where I think having a podcast comes in. It's like the place where you can educate your market, you can make them understand more, make them a better educated consumer. Mm-hmm. But I think you have to be willing to be in it for at least a year. That's usually the recommendation I make to make a decision on it. But too many people try to make a decision within 3 to 6 months, and you're only getting your feet under you after 6 months. Yeah. So I would say if you're going to have a show, commit to it for a year. But frankly, going on shows as a guest is actually the first action you should take if you're going to start a show. Because if you understand what it's like to be a guest, it makes you a better host. So ultimately, there's a lot of different paths you can go down. But I think if you look at it, Arlen, like, you have to look at which one's right for your brand, because not every person should be hosting a podcast. Some brands aren't right to go guesting on a podcast. It might make more sense to them to do affiliate deals. There's a lot of different angles you can go, man.
Yeah, I see. I'm glad you broke it down like that. There's definitely a lot of options. You don't necessarily have to create your own podcast, because one of the things that I see dealing with e-commerce businesses, you know, on a kind of a daily basis and talking to other business owners, is that, you know, they hear all of the stats and they see all of these successful podcasts. They want to get out there. They feel it can be great exposure. Like you said, it becomes a hub of information for your customers and potential customers. So, you know, it can be a great vehicle. But I think one of the biggest pain points that people have is that the content piece of it, because they already know there's so many other podcasts out there that are vying for people's attention. How do you come up with the right content that is going to, really just engage so it's just not, another piece of content that just kind of, goes out there. It's like the saying that they say, if there's a tree in the forest that falls and it makes noise and nobody hears it, does it really make noise? Or, something like that. But, how do you figure it out? What's the strategy for figuring out what's the right piece of content?
I think there was a song about that when I was in school. If a tree falls in the forest.
Right.
But like, interestingly enough, I think the step everybody skips is kind of the surveying step. What are people in my market or what are people in my vertical already doing? Do you know what I mean? Like, they're just like, all right, this is the show I'm going to do. I'm going to pump the show out and then we're going to get it out there. But you have to survey first. What are other people doing in your market? What are they doing well? What are they doing terrible? Because the actual, the value is in the gap between where your competitors are doing well and they're not doing well. And that's where your content's located. Like, what are they missing and what can you do better and what can you teach better? Mm-hmm. I was talking to one of our clients about this 2 days ago, and he calls it the, what the heck did he call it? The market leader process. Like, if you want to become so well known by your competitors that they're looking at your content and saying, shoot, what am I missing? Right. I think that's the biggest thing, is you want to look at where is that gap. The other thing as well, and is surveying, like, what terminology are people using to talk about it for, like, naming your show? Because I think as well, people try to get too, like, creative and esoteric about the name, where, like, you look at, like, the title of your show. The title of your show is perfect because it describes exactly what it does and what people are going to get from it. So I think that's important too. Like, what is the gap in the content being developed, and, where can your expertise fit in? But also, what's a name that people are going to say, oh, I know exactly what I'm getting from the show. And then when you're looking at that as well, you have to go kind of even deeper. Like, okay, is this show going to be interview based or is this show going to be content based? And if it's going to be content based, you have to understand, like, there's a lot of script writing that goes into that, man. Like, I know it's probably a little bit in the weeds, but, like, I had a history podcast for years. Those scripts took forever to write because there's a lot of research in that. And you have to understand, when you're doing that for your own podcast, actually scripting a podcast takes a lot of work. So for me, you want maybe interviewing market leaders within your market makes the most sense because it takes the least amount of prep for the best return. Now as well, another thing that's really great too is there's some great tools out there. There's one called Sintra, Sintra. It's a app that plugs in with ChatGPT, and it lets you create like a competitive advantage bot. So basically, you can put in competitors' websites, and it'll tell you where the gaps are in the market. So, like, those are the type of things you need to be doing to know, like, what are the gaps that I can cover in my show? Because if you really can't find gaps to cover, then it might not be a great idea to start a show. Like, it's not a bad thing to just not do a podcast.
Yeah, man, I like that. You don't necessarily have to follow the crowd, so to speak, and then just jump in there just because everybody's doing a podcast. It may not be right for your business. So yeah, I like that. I like the fact that you're suggesting surveying it first rather than just kind of jumping in there and just, throwing it out there, seeing if it sticks.
Like, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Of course, as a marketer, we're always told that you should, test, try different things, test. If it doesn't work, pivot. So there's nothing wrong with trying something, but, you don't want to, as a business owner, your time is valuable. So you definitely have to make sure it's the right fit.
Well, because surveys are the key to stats, man. Like, you have to know, like, what are the words people use? Like, for us, like, one of the first entries into our business is we do this, like, really good free masterclass, and we teach people a lot in it. But we actually surveyed our entire CRM, which is like 7,000 people. What word makes the most sense to you? Webinar, training, masterclass. Because even to that effect, your marketing is going to be more effective if you use the right words. So if you're surveying, like, then you can take what you're doing and double down on it. But I think a lot of people try to throw an idea out there and then wonder why it doesn't work, and then try to make an iteration on the iteration when they actually don't know the data. Like, you got to have data, man.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, data is king, for sure. Now, let's say you're getting going, you're an e-commerce business, you've done the survey, you see that it makes sense, you see that there's a gap in your market, or there's a gap in this whole podcast space for the content that you can actually produce, and you're getting going with it, and you're wondering, okay, there's production costs for this, of course. I got to get my equipment together, I got to edit it, I have to have an editor. I've got to promote it. So all of these things cost money. And so the next logical thing that you're thinking about is monetization. How can I monetize this to not only cover my costs, but make a little bit of revenue from this? Are there any specific monetization strategies that you would recommend for a business at that point?
Well, if you're looking at it as an e-commerce business, like you have to look at it in two different ways. Like, am I an e-commerce seller or am I somebody teaching people about e-commerce? So if you're teaching people about e-commerce, then like it makes a hell of a lot of sense for you to have a podcast and think about, okay, so, what are the different products I recommend? Okay, I use this for landing pages. I use this for, optimization. I use this for this strategy and this software. Like those are the things you should be thinking of. So when you're talking about them, then you go out and you interview those people that sell those different products that are going to help make your market better. And then you promote those products. So like, if you're going to look at it as a podcaster from that perspective, where like, hey, I'm an e-commerce guy and I'm teaching about e-commerce. Now, like, let's say within e-commerce, like, let's say you're a product driven e-commerce person. Well, it actually makes a lot more sense for you to go on shows as a guest. And I'll tell you why. Like we have a couple of different clients that have sold like really good products. Like we had one client that sold an aloe product, but his aloe product was sold e-commerce, right? So that's how they made all their money online. So what he did is he is brilliant when it comes to e-commerce, to aloe. So he would go on these different shows within the health niche, and he would present the host first with, hey, I want to be on your show and I want to do an affiliate deal with you. So they would get, I think, like 25 to 50% commission on everything they sell. So now the host wants to pitch your product. And then he would get on and he would just over deliver, and he would teach people everything about his product. He even like taught people how to make his product, but they didn't even want to buy it. So they trusted him so much, it would get to the end, and now the host is monetarily invested and he's monetarily invested. He had one show that he sold $60,000 of his aloe product on because he structured it the right way. So if you're going on it as an e-commerce seller and you have a product like that is like a tangible product you can sell, or like even a SaaS product, like there's a really good market to do it as an affiliate deal and go really niche in that niche. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. And I see what you're saying. You want to definitely see if there's that niche there for it, and if it does make sense. And, also alternatively, you could look at other podcasts in your space that are out there, other e-commerce businesses that have podcasts. What are they doing? Are they monetizing it? If they are, what type of ads do they put on it? And you can try to approach even not only those same companies, but companies that are similar to those that are advertising on that podcast. So
there's databases out there. I think Podchaser does it, and there's a few other ones that you can actually put in shows, and you can see what podcast or company is spending money on. Yeah. So then you can say, okay, well, this company's spending money, that company's spending money. Great. I'm going to pitch them on like advertising on my show too. Yeah. So you can also figure out quick, like where are people spending money and approach those people. I think like to just build a show and wait for inbound, like you're unless you get huge, man, you're going to be waiting. You need to really make it an outbound thing and finding the right show, the right advertisers.
You definitely do. Yeah. The inbound is because we're at the point where there's so many, unless like you said, you're at the millions and millions of listens and downloads and views, then companies are going to start chasing you. But there's only a handful that are really at that particular level.
And when you're looking at the money strategy on that too, like this is my personal opinion, maybe yours is different, but like I don't think a CPM benefits most podcasters, like in terms of like saying like, for X number of 1,000 downloads, this is what you pay. Cause I think the average like CPM payout is like $15 or $25 per 1,000, which is like not much. Yeah. Like if you're going to do advertising, like do flat rate advertising with people and say, hey, like I have a minimum buy, like you have to buy at least 1 month worth of episodes of my show for two reasons. Number one, it's more money for you. Number two, people are going to hear that ad more times. So the advertiser will actually get a return. And the other thing is like affiliate deals, man. Like I actually make more money with affiliate deals than I did with CPM. So you got to see what works for you.
Okay. Awesome. Now, marketing 101, anytime, you hear a marketer or go to a marketing course, one of the main things that we always hear is that stories sell, not facts and figures and info about your product. People always want to hear about a story, an engaging story around your brand. And that's what kind of pulls people in. So how do you believe podcasts have a unique advantage in storytelling for brands? And is there any particular example of a brand that you feel has done exceptionally well at doing this?
Well, when I think of it, it's number one, because you have the amount of time you have to answer questions and have a conversation. Storytelling fits well is one part of it. But I think stories are that thing that tie in what you taught and what people are going to remember, because they're not always going to remember what you taught them, but they're going to remember the story. So when you're answering questions, you can say, like, hey, that's a great question. You answer the question, say, I have a story like that, Like, it makes it more real to the person. So I think that's where stories have a ton of value, is they're something that gives people reality, but is also going to help them remember it. When I think of that, actually a really great client, Chris Miles Money is the guy's name. He has a podcast, I think, since like 2015 or something like that. But he's been on a lot of shows as a guest. And one of the things he does is he tells this incredible story about how he helped his dad with, helping him to manage money. And it was the thing he always wanted to do, and like what he was able to do. So people hear that and they're like, man, he went to that length for his dad. Well, how's he going to help me? Right. Like, so they're really intrigued and they're really into it. It creates a reality point. Like, okay, I can see that he did it and he can do it. Right. That's one part of it. But the other part about it is it also creates an emotional connection. Like, people have an emotional buy-in to what you're going to tell them. So I think that's the real value in story, man. It takes your points and it makes them stronger. Like, that's a really thing to consider.
Yeah. That emotional buy-in is you nailed it there. It's really what is that engagement factor. That's what really is going to pull people in and get them to not only engage with your brand, but just kind of keep them coming back for more and continually, listen to episode after episode. Even if they've already become a customer of your brand, there's, getting them to come back, getting them to refer others is also a big factor in that.
It's what makes them different, man. Like, it's like why people would come to you versus somebody else, because they're like, I know you, I've spent so much time with you, I've learned about you. Like, maybe you have animals and you talk about it in the show. Maybe you talk about your kids in the show. You bring these stories into the show so people start to feel like they know you. And I think that's the real value, man. You're not just another podcast host, you're a friend. And I think that's something that's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I'd say another pain point, I guess you could say, for somebody that's a podcaster, a new podcaster, it's an e-commerce business, another pain point outside of, getting the content. Let's say they've come up with a niche for the content. They found that there's a hole in the market of a particular type of content that's not being served. The next step is going to be, or the next kind of pain issue that they have is going to be promotion. Mm-hmm. Now, I know your role with your particular brand, as well as your role as a podcast host, you've seen, I know, a ton of different promotion strategies. Now, could you share some effective ways that podcasters can not only promote, but either cross-promote and help grow their podcast outreach?
So I guess as a guest or as a host, what do you want more specifics on? Because I could go either way. What do you want the most?
I would say as a host. You've
Okay.
got a podcast, you're hosting it, and you're trying to grow it.
Okay, so I would say, like, number one, like, if you're not doing video in 2024, man, like, you got to be doing video. Like, it is vital. YouTube is the number 2 search engine in the world, and if you're not on YouTube, like, you're not getting found. So I would say that's the number one thing you have to consider. So within that, there's so much of an opportunity to get found there. So video optimization is another really big part of it. There's a few pieces of software I like around that. I've used a couple different ones, but I'm a big fan of vidIQ. vidIQ like scores your videos. They also have a new great tool for they use an AI that'll actually create the thumbnails for you, which is really helpful as well. So that's a really, really great service for growing traffic. Another part of that is there's a tool I like called, I'm going to spell it too, because it doesn't spell like it sounds. It's called video.ai. So vidyo.ai. It's like video.
Okay.
And what you can actually do is put in a link to a YouTube video or upload an entire file. So it'll take that and create actually like all the chapter segments. It'll also create reels and shorts and stuff like that. So it can take your content and make it into, a big like wealth of content, I guess you could say in some ways. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing you have to consider then is when people are coming back to your site, like, where are the leaky holes in your bucket? So there's a couple different types of software I like. Number one is you should be pixeling your site so you can retarget people, whether it's on Google or what's on Facebook. The other thing I would say is there's a really great tool, and I think their audience is more like big e-commerce sellers, but I've used it as somebody running an agency as well. It used to be called getemails.com. Now it's called retention.com, but it's actually a piece of code that goes on your website, and they can take about 30 to 50% of your anonymous web traffic and actually opt those people into your list. So now you're growing your list. But you have to think of like, how can I get found? How can I get seen? And how can I grow what I'm doing? So for me, those are the things I'm concentrating on, is how can I grow my list? And also, how can I get more people to see my content on YouTube specifically?
That's great, because I know it's a big issue as far as, getting it out there, getting the exposure. I know as a podcast host, that's, one of the things that's always on the forefront of our team's minds is, how do we get more downloads? How do we get it really out there? And the video I know is really, really, really huge.
But it's not even just downloads. Like on YouTube, like you got to check your watch hours, man. Like how long are people watching it? Like I don't care as much about streams and plays, but if my watch hours are high, well, that means I have really good engagement. So that's the thing I'll be watching.
Yep, for sure. Well, Jeremy, as we get ready to wrap things up, I wanted to see, are there any emerging trends that are coming out that you predict will shape the podcasting industry in the near future, especially for brands that are looking to grow their audience and their influence?
Well, there was a book that I read a number of years ago called The Lexus and the Olive Tree. It was by Tom Friedman that writes for the New York Times. And he's like, we're seeing the democratization of finance. It's, finance is becoming, available to the everyday person. So what I think we're seeing in podcasting now is we're going to see the democratization of podcasting. And I think what I mean by that is we're seeing so many really good and affordable AI tools come out that we're seeing really good quality podcast content become available to absolutely everyone. So, we've cut about 80% of the cost out of our podcast production process when we produce our show, but we're getting, 10 times the reach we got. So I think that's the thing to really consider. And we found a lot of the great tools to take a lot of the time and effort out of it. So I think that's what you're going to see is you're going to see better quality shows and production and hosting, but at a much more affordable price where it becomes available to more people. And I think that's the exciting part, man, because then what happens within that is this more of like the cream rising to the top. Okay, so, how are the best shows going to then grow more as we get more quality shows into the space?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's really the main thing because, I don't see them going anywhere. I think podcasts are only going to continue to grow. There's going to continue to be more and more. And we're just going to have to see where is all this going. We do have all of these new types of media now coming out now. We had the Apple Vision Pro, which was just launched. I saw some early reviews and people demoing it. That I think is another thing that I think is going to change the space, especially with remote podcasting when you're not in the same room like we are. I think that's another thing that I think people need to kind of keep an eye on.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting about that is the more, I guess, technological and detached we become, the better of an opportunity it becomes for us as hosts. And the reason I say that is because people are dying for humanity and human connection. So the more human and the more real you can be as a host, like don't cut out all those ums, buts, and ahs, right? Don't cut those out. Normal people do that. Yeah. When your dog barks, leave it in there because people are like, oh, he's got a dog. He's a person. Like people are actually dying for humanity, the less humanity we see in things. And I think that's actually a bigger opportunity out there for a lot of us creating content. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for coming on. This has been an awesome conversation. As a podcast host and a business owner, I can always talk about podcasting, and I love the, pushing it and or touting the all of the cons for doing it, and the reasons not to do it. Like you said, you can go both ways. But yeah, I think this is an awesome conversation. I know it's going to go a long way with our listeners and our viewers. But lastly, before we do let you go, I always like to share. Like our guests to share one closing fun fact about themselves that you think we'd be interested to know.
I'm closing in on 40. I'm 37, but in my early 20s, I used to be a competitive powerlifter. Okay. I am at that point in time in my life, I'm only 165 pounds now, but I was 5'7", 220, and I pulled an 80,000 pound army tank. To raise money for the Wounded Warrior Project. So that's how I used to spend my 20s.
Wow, that's definitely a fun fact. Wow, $80,000 tank. Whoa, 80,000 pound tank. Wow, yeah. That's a lot of weight.
They put it on the back of an 18-wheeler because obviously with those treads, you can't get a tank to move. So they put it on the back of an 18-wheeler. They put the 18-wheeler in neutral. And then if you get really low, you can slowly get it to move and eventually get it to move quickly.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely a fun fact. Wow, that's something I probably couldn't get it to barely inch at all. Well, I know that took a lot of training to get to that point, though. I know that.
Yeah, many years.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jeremy, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you for coming on and thank you for joining us. If our listeners and viewers would like to pick your brain any more about podcasting or how you can help their business, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Well, my goal and has really been, it's by the name of our company, also by the theme of our conversation, is to really help people command your brand. Like I think podcasts are the number one way now and in the future to reach your market and to create an impact. So I actually wrote a really awesome book out there that people can grab right now for it's free. Just got to cover the shipping. If they head over to bestpodcastbook.com, they can grab that new book, which is called Command Your Brand, Grow Your Impact, Income, and Influence in a New Media Landscape. So that is bestpodcastbook.com.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. Definitely encourage people to check that out. We'll have the link to that in the show notes, as well as a link to your company's brand, commandyourbrand.com. All right, Jeremy. Well, thanks again for coming on the E-Commerce Marketing Podcast. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you for listening to the E-Commerce Marketing Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Are you looking to take your digital marketing to the next level but are tired of weeding through countless YouTube videos with unproven and untrusted marketing strategies? Well, we have the answer for you. The More Sales Every Month online digital marketing course. In this information-packed course, you will learn effective keyword research, link building, content marketing, and much more to attract and convert your site visitors into paying customers. Just go to moresaleseverymonth.com and sign up today for a low one-time fee. In addition to this power-packed course, if you would like to get access to a growing repository of digital marketing articles, PDFs, and ebooks, check out getosi.com/resources and opt in to get full access to our library of priceless marketing information to help you take your digital marketing to the next level.